And the lack of discernment in the world will make it even easier to fall for all of the signs that this false priest will bring. Verse 13, it performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of the people. Remember the 2 witnesses? They did that. And by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it will deceive those who dwell on the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. Make no mistake, satanic wonders will be very impressive. They will be, but they are deceptive. And if you're going to spot them, if you're going to be able to tell the fraud from the real thing, then you better know the real thing. You better have discernment. And so this man comes along and says, look, I can call down fire from heaven, and the confusion will just build for people. They'll say he's like Elijah. And he just twists the truth even more. But look, the easiest way to spot a false prophet is when they violate the commands of God. That's the easiest proof that there is to know whether or not somebody is truly from God or not. No legitimate prophet of God will violate God's commands. And telling the people to make an image of the first beast is a clear violation of God's direct commandments to the people. God tells the people there will be no graven images, period. Not even graven images to me or about me. Period, none, zero. But maybe people are so ready to have something to believe in at this point that they'll just believe in anything. Maybe after the 7 seals and 7 trumpets, they're just like, aha, well, finally there's a God I can understand. Remember that old maxim? I mean, it's become kind of an old maxim. If you believe in nothing, you'll fall for anything. And after years of shaking their fist at God, which is essentially saying, I don't believe that you exist, I believe in nothing at all, now they're ready to believe in anything. And Satan is pleased. Satan's excited by that. Anytime anyone or anything worships anyone other than God, Satan is pleased. He doesn't need the worship, he just doesn't want God to get it. And so that's the purpose of the false priest. He brings the false priest up to get people to worship the Antichrist because after all, he's a great leader, and that's how we are geared in our societies. We say, hey, we need a leader to lead us. But the Antichrist needs something more. He needs to make sure that he requires this worship. He needs to twist that just a little bit harder to make sure that we understand we're up against it, we have no choice. And so he comes up with this ingenious tool to force this worship. He makes a deceptive device that causes the celebration of this unholy Trinity. Verse 16, also it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. And you're thinking to yourself, aha, this is finally it. This is the whole reason why I endured all of those other sermons, because I wanted to know what this was about. Join the club, right? We're all there. Now, first I want to just point out, when anybody uses those terms, small and great, rich or poor, what they mean by that's just a linguistic device to say everybody. Well, why didn't they just say that? Well, because poetically it's nicer. Okay? So he's saying everyone. This is going to be a universal requirement for everyone. If you want to buy or sell anything, Amazon's going to be no help to you unless you have the mark. Whatever that is. What do you mean, whatever it is? It says right there, it's 666. Verse 18, this calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. For it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Okay, yes, it does say that. And if we're reading literally, we go, okay, it's 666, that's what it is. I don't think it's going to be 666 because quite honestly, that is the most recognizable number on the face of the planet. I mean, everybody knows, if I see 666, I know that's the Antichrist, all right. It's not going to be that obvious. We said that. I mean, lies are not obvious. These kinds of lies especially are not going to be that obvious. So no, I don't think it'll be as simple as them tattooing 3 number 6s on your hand or your forehead. But that realization that it can't be that simple has encouraged an obsession with figuring out what this mark, with figuring out who it is tied to, who the Antichrist is. If you go into any sort of Christian bookstore, you'll see that a huge section is devoted to this subject. And so people think, if we can just figure out what this mark is, then we'll know who the beast is. And they have come up with some really very incredible, and I mean that in the fantastic sense, theories on who this person is over the years. Using numerology, now numerology is you take letters and you attach numbers to them, right? And you take, Nero, this is the first one that we know from history that this was done to, and then you transliterate that into Hebrew, and then you give each one of those letters a numerical value. Guess what you get? 666. So it must be Nero. But now here we are 2,000 years later, and, it doesn't appear that that was the case. So from Nero, then it became Domitian, and they had to do these jumping jacks to figure out how we could make Domitian fit with 666. And then it was Diocletian, who, by the way, made Nero look like a schoolboy in terms of his persecution of Christians. And then much later, people said Napoleon was the one. And then Hitler, and then Stalin. People thought Mikhail Gorbachev, when he came to power, they all said, now we know who the Antichrist is. It's Mikhail Gorbachev, because after all, the USSR is made up of, it's not 10 nations. Well, whatever. It's got to be Mikhail, because Mikhail means God with us. No, it means who is like God. That's what it is. Well, we get stuff mixed up in our heads. So clearly, he's the usurper. He's got to be, right? And they're still doing it today. Every few years, people throw out a new candidate. Usually it coincides with an election. Whoever they don't like, that's got to be the Antichrist, right? That's how it works. We're always just kind of guessing. John Walvoord says this in his great commentary on Revelation. There probably have been hundreds of explanations continuing down to the present day. The only thing obvious is that if the number refers to an individual, it is not clear to whom it refers. I'll leave it to him. He's made a whole lifetime career studying this subject. Probably the best interpretation is that the number 6 is just simply one number less than the perfect number 7. The threefold repetition of 6 then would indicate dragon, Antichrist, false prophet. Together, slightly less perfect versions of the Trinity. And there are, based on that, no perfections within this unholy alliance. See, ultimately, we should be looking at Jesus Christ, who is the perfection. And not the Antichrist, not at all, but people will fall for the Antichrist because they lack discernment. They won't be able to tell the difference between perfection and a cheap fake. We're getting better at producing fakes all the time, so you can see why. Now, I keep using that word discernment, and it's an important word for us to understand. Because I think ultimately this is what Scripture speaks about. We are to be discerning continually over and over and over. It's just that whenever we exercise discernment, people say we're judging. It's not the same thing at all. I think there's a clue to this idea of discernment in verse 18. Look at the beginning of this verse. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. And somehow the one who has understanding will be able to figure this out when the time comes. Again, I do not think the beast is yet on the scene. He may be alive. Maybe a child. I don't know. Maybe he's even a junior, politician somewhere. I don't know. But I don't think that we're going to know who it is ahead of time. One pastor, in his efforts of trying to figure out who the Antichrist was using numerology, discovered that it turned out to be his wife. Probably want to do away with that idea. But those who are discerning at the right time, when he comes on the scene, they're going to be able to see the clues of the sign of this man. And therefore, they're going to know who is the leader of this false religion. And so the way John writes this is, let the one having understanding, having reason, nous in the Greek, it's better to translate like they have an understanding of the question. That's discernment. You understand the question so well that you can figure out the answer. Through this understanding, through reason, the people at the end will be able to recognize this false priest and this antichrist, if they have wisdom, if they have understanding, if they have discernment. You see, at the heart of all of this is the value of discernment. How will I know who the Antichrist is? Well, if you know the reality of Christ, you're going to have a great way to be able to tell the difference between him and the fraud. The Greek word that we translate in Scripture as discernment is krino. It literally means to cut or to separate. The idea is that it cuts through all of the noise, all of the impressions, all of the lies, all of the mumbo jumbo, and says, I can tell which is a lie and which is the truth. And people with wisdom and understanding see what isn't clear to the general population. That's discernment. They understand events with discerning wisdom because they understand, because they have experience with truth. See, discernment detects deception. It's like a mother with her child. They just seem to know when their child is lying to them. At least my mother did. Webster says discernment is the quality of being able to grasp what is obscure, to see what is not evident to the average mind. That's discernment. So discernment hears what isn't said as much as what is said. The discerning person will be able to tell when this false priest lies. They'll be able to tell when someone is out of step with the one true God. Because they know that there aren't many ways to God. A discerning person will recognize that Scripture says the gate is narrow. Well, that's very narrow-minded of you, Pastor. I'm just quoting Scripture. Discerning people can see that it isn't obvious, what isn't obvious to the world. Discerning people can see what the gullible can't see. And when an issue, any issue is at stake, discerning people can focus both on what is addressed and what isn't addressed. And you see that sometimes, right? Have you ever experienced that? You encounter somebody that just knows how to ask the right question? I had a mentor once that said, Matt, don't argue with people. Just figure out what the right question is. You don't need to argue if you ask the right question. That's discernment. How do you get that discernment? I don't know, I'm not there. No, actually, Hebrews, the writer of Hebrews shows us. The writer of Hebrews, which I always joke is Paul, because it is, but he tells his audience, he's frustrated with his audience for their lack of growth. And he says, you need milk, not solid food. For everyone who lives on milk is unskilled in the word of righteousness since he is a child. But solid food is for the mature, for those who have their powers of, there's the word, discernment trained by constant practice to distinguish good from evil. See, solid food is for the mature, and you only get to that maturity by constant practice. Time spent engaged, wrestling with the truth, learning, reading, studying, applying, growing. And when you do that, our senses then become trained in discernment, being able to tell right from wrong. But without that training, without that hard work of being able to tell the truth, be able to see the truth, being able to understand the truth, without that training, we will fall for anything. We won't be able to tell the difference. As soon as life gets hard, we'll take whatever it is that makes us feel okay, and we'll use that. But discernment says, there's no nutrition in cotton candy. So don't just tell me what I want to hear, tell me the truth. You live on the edge of understanding. You see the news every day. I mean, social media has made it so impossible to avoid the news, you can't help yourself, right? And so you have to be able to say, how does Scripture speak to that? When somebody makes a claim and says this person is or is not this evil one that is to come, well, how does that fit in with Scripture? And does it actually fit with Scripture? Maybe it does. Maybe they're right. But you're going to have to practice that discernment in order to be able to tell for sure. Don't take somebody else's word for it. And the world says, well, now you're judging people. No, I'm not. I'm just cutting through the baloney. I'm seeing reality. Cutting through all the fantastic stuff and seeing what is really being done. And the people at the end, the people that John is talking to here who have wisdom, who have this understanding, they're somehow going to be able to see the events unfold, and they'll be able to tell that this is the beast that is foretold. They're going to be able to say, hey, that thing that you guys are all running to get, put on your forehead or on your hand or whatever it is going to be, whatever that's going to look like, this is the mark. You got to stop. They're going to be awake to those issues. They're going to be discerning. But you know what they're going to be told? Stop judging me. I want to get the mark. I need to eat. So here's my prayer for us as a church. Because it's easy to say, oh, that's for other people. That's not for us. This is my prayer, that we would be discerning, that we would be able to cut through all the mumbo jumbo, to be able to see the truth for what it really is. May we recognize that there is only one way to true peace. Jesus says he is the way, the truth, and the life. The way, the truth, the life. He's making a claim that he is the only way. He is the only truth. He is the only life. He goes on to say, I'm the only way that you're going to get to the Father. If you know me, you know the Father. But if you don't know me, you won't know the Father. You say, well, that's very restrictive. He's being very condemning to people that don't know him. Yes, that's true. Yes, he is. He alone says that he is the way to salvation, that he is the way to assurance of salvation. Well, that's got to be wrong. He's got to be wrong in that. Okay, well, those are your only two options. Either he's a liar or he's telling the truth, because you can't make the claim that he's a lunatic. He's too rational for that. His arguments make too much sense. So he's either a liar or he's actually what he claims to be, which is the Lord. If he's a liar, you should throw out everything that he says, because you can't believe any of it. You don't know. That's what you do with liars. But if he's Lord, then you have to trust him and take him at his word and say, yes, absolutely, you must be the only way to salvation.